Now, the kids of the area see this old dilapidated house, and as they're wont to do, they say it's haunted.
Right.
And there is a real tragedy in the house's history with Frank Cherry's
Sure.
suicide.
Yeah, this is. I made this all up. I have no historical precedent for this, but I got the idea that there had to be this kind of dark history there, and imagined someone having lived there who got ruined in the stock market in the '29 crash and committed suicide in the house. The only real precedent I have for that, when I was in school in Charlottesville at UVA, I lived in a house down in the Belmont neighborhood of Charlottesville near the downtown mall, and weird things happened in this house. Like really weird things happened. Things were like moving around. We'd hear noises. One day I came home from work, and my roommate had left a note, and he's like, "Come meet me down at Miller's," which is this kind of famous bar on the downtown mall in Charlottesville. And so I went down and I met him, and he was shaking, right? He was really upset. And I was like, well, what's going on? And he tells me, well, he had these figurines that he'd set up on the mantle that he'd collected and had been given by like his grandparents of, various religious figures from different religious traditions around the world. And they had been flung across the floor and smashed like all over the floor of the living room. And he was asking me if I had any explanation for it. We'd had kind of an argument earlier in the day. He's like, did you do this because you're mad at me or something like that? I was like, I've been gone all day long, man. I didn't do this. So he's like, well, I don't know, but I think there's something going on in the house. And I said, okay. So we better talk to Phil, the guy who owns the house. He was this kind of interesting character. He was a stockbroker, but he was also kind of an ex-hippie and, just sort of typical Charlottesville eccentric. And so we asked Phil the next time we saw him. He always would park his car and walk to work at our house. He had moved out into out to Crozet, which is kind of a little rural community outside of Charlottesville. Hey, Phil, we're not trying to freak you out or anything like this, but can you explain these noises? He's like, oh, that's probably Gary. And I said, who's Gary, man? And it turned out Gary was his friend who had owned the house before him and who had died in the house. He had, when everybody else, they had been college fraternity brothers, and when everybody else had kind of outgrown their vices, Gary did not, and he ended up becoming really badly addicted to drugs, and had ended up ODing on crack cocaine in the house, and died there. And then after Phil bought the house and moved into it, and so I was thinking of the tragedy of Gary as a good starting point for a kind of haunted house mystery, although a much different kind of story than the one that I had invented. But yeah, I thought that would be, I wanted to give it kind of that old school Gothic, a little bit of sort of the air of the supernatural. Again, because this is one of those things, any small town you go to, somebody's going to tell you, oh, that house is haunted, and they'll be able to tell you a story like that.
And so Paul tells that story to Rocky.
Sure.
And says, do you want to go see it?
Yeah. And he doesn't. He's terrified, but he loves his brother, so he does. He goes, and horrifying things ensue from that point. And I thought, too, I knew... This is, you're describing the action in chapter 1, and I knew that I wanted to start off with a bang, literally. The sound of the gunshot. I was definitely thinking about the old Chekhov's gun rule. If you're going to put a gun in a story, somebody better shoot it. And so I decided I'd start with a bang.
And I'll have to say, I laughed out loud. Sorry to ruin this. And I can't even play this on the radio, but
Sure.
for the podcast I can. When Rocky yells out, "Die, Frank Cherry, you whore." I couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah, thanks, man. I wanted there to be some laughter in there, and I definitely, the secondary goal, there is a lot of tragedy in this story, and there is a lot of tension, and it's pretty dramatic, but I also wanted it to be funny, and I think there's certainly some effort toward humor throughout the story, so it's very rewarding to me to hear that you got that.